My name is Kate Marshall. I'm a volunteer board member with Heritage Toronto, and I'm very happy to welcome you here tonight. The Cultural Heritage panel that is we're conducting. Heritage Toronto would first like to begin this evening by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the New Credit and home to many diverse Aboriginal people. You may or may not know Heritage Toronto is a charitable agency of the City of Toronto that works hard to celebrate our city's rich history in a variety of ways. This event tonight is one of them. You may also know us through our Plaques and Markers program, our walking tours, bike tours, bus tours, or perhaps through the Heritage Toronto Awards, which are coming up October 21st, and hopefully you may join us at Kerner Hall for that event. We're always looking for ways to reach new audiences with excellent programming, and that's why we've issued a survey that's on your seat, and we would love to know from you how you feel about this evening's event after. So please fill it out at the end of the event. You can leave it on your chair, or you can place it in the box on our information table as you leave. And if you're interested and you're a tweeter, then please follow the conversation on Twitter, and you can let us know what you think via hashtag #HTCulture. So tonight's event. This event tonight is tied into the research and production of a State of Heritage Toronto report that Heritage Toronto will be releasing in early 2015. It's actually our second report. We issued a report in 2010 on the state of heritage in Toronto, so this is our second report. Our 2015 report will document what we as citizens, heritage professionals, city staff, and/or politicians have done well over the past 4 years, and what we'll need to improve on in the next term of City Council. So the report is always scheduled to come out after the new City Council sits. Over the past few months, we've been consulting with stakeholders across the city to gather their views, and tonight we get a chance to address issues surrounding how we raise awareness and educate each other about the rich cultural diversity of our city, which makes it so unique. I'd like to thank, before I do the introductions, I would like to thank and recognize our supporters. As a city agency, Heritage Toronto is grateful for the support it receives from the City of Toronto. We also want to recognize our partnership with the Toronto Public Library, who's provided this wonderful space for us tonight. And finally, I'd like to thank McLean Foundation for their support of our State of Heritage project, of which this symposium is a part. And now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator and our panelists. On the far right, we have Nation Chong. Since 2006, Nation Chong has helped to lead the Youth Challenge Fund, a $46.6 million investment in youth-led and youth-driven initiatives across Toronto's inner suburban communities. This work is centered around the needs of the city's most underserved youth and stands on four key pillars. Programs must be youth-led, youth-driven, collaborative, indigenous to the community, and engendering systematic change. In his new role as the United Way's Director of Youth Initiatives, Nation oversees the Youth Challenge Fund legacy initiatives while supporting the development and implementation of United Way's Youth Success Strategy. We also have with us Tanzina Islam. Tanzina is a project coordinator at the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians and has a master's degree in health promotions with a focus on equity-focused service planning. She currently organizes citywide community development initiatives that promote social justice and advocate for health equity of diverse populations. Her work emphasizes the importance of fostering community engagement and effective integration in Canadian society to improve social, physical, and mental health, and to improve the well-being of marginalized communities. As part of her work, Tanzina facilitates anti-oppression, equity, and cultural competency training. Scott Kettles is the executive director, with the Canadian Lesbian and Gay Archives, an organization founded in 1973. It has since grown to become the largest independent LGBTQ+ archives in the world. Scott leads the archives as it aspires to be a significant resource and catalyst for those who strive for a future world where lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered people are accepted, valued, and celebrated. Scott works with the Board of Directors committees and many volunteers to make that mandate a reality. We're very pleased to have with us Carolyn King, who's a former elected chief of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the First Nation which lived here in the 1700s, which signed treaties with the British Crown to allow the founding of our city, and which considers Toronto their ancestral homeland today. Carolyn has been an outspoken and effective advocate for the recognition of the history of her people in the Toronto area. A board member of the Toronto Historical Association and active in many projects, Carolyn has played a critical role in the creation of the shared path on the Humber River and is the champion behind the Moccasin Project, which we'll hear more about this evening. Sitaram Singh has a long history of community activism involving a wide range of issues, including gender equity, LGBTQ rights, heritage conservation, disability access, Aboriginal issues, and race relations. In addition to her community advocacy, Sita worked in the Toronto Public Service for 3 decades prior to her retirement in 2010. During her tenure as the city's manager on diversity and community engagement, she was involved with introducing many groundbreaking equity and human rights policies that have made Toronto a social justice leader. Sita was appointed to City Council in July 2014 and will serve as the councillor for Ward 20, Trinity Spadina, until November 30th, 2014. Finally, our moderator, Karen Carter, is the Executive Director of Heritage Toronto. In that role, she's led the organization in efforts to better represent the full cultural diversity of Toronto in the stories that Heritage Toronto tells of our city's people, places, and events. So please join me in thanking our panel, and I'll hand it over to Karen.
How are you? I'm sure we've messed up the sound guy because Nation Chong took my seat. We tested the mic earlier, and he was like, okay, test this one because that's where you're sitting. But, you know, this is what happens when you have a rebellious panel. Let's see how much trouble we can get into in this conversation as I look around at them. Thank you all for coming. I'm sure this is going to be an interesting discussion. And I'm going to start us off by suggesting 2 things. The first is that you have a sheet of paper that looks like this. It's green and it has questions, and that is, as I was saying to the panel in the back, we're controlling the fun. You can write questions down there, and there's also 2 questions that we've asked you that you can answer or comment on, and that will allow us to kind of curate what comes up to the panel this evening as we go through the conversation. So we're going to break after a few questions to hear from you if you have any comments or questions, so please feel free to fill those out and to pass them to the Heritage Toronto staff that are in with us this evening. I'm going to start off with our first question, which is asking about cultural diversity beyond the notion of a marketing tool, which is often the way we think about often the way we think about Toronto and its diversity. We think of it from a tourism angle. So this city has built its identity on cultural diversity, on being the most multicultural city in the world, some would say. How well do we understand what that diversity means beyond a marketing tool? I'm going to start with Sita on my far left.
Am I on your far left? Anyway, that was a political comment, in case anybody
And I knew you would go there.
It is certainly true that people who tend to do work these days on cultural diversity issues tend to point to the business advantage, the issues around tourism, and so on and so forth. But I think that actually diversity has more fundamental characteristics, more fundamental qualities than that. It's about civic participation. It's about finding ways of feeling that you are part of the society, and it is about feeling that you actually belong and you're not just an object or an activity. I know that when I first became involved in this work in the early 70s, and it's certainly true that the Toronto City Hall has a very different approach to diversity than some of the social service agencies, and it's certainly very different from how school talks about diversity issues, because it is about, it is about complete feeling that you completely belong. It's about identity, it's about respect, it's about feeling that you actually have an equal chance to get a job, and that there are no barriers based on your race or your culture, your language. So that's, sort of how I come to it.
The sound guy's telling me.
Pardon me?
The sound guy's telling us that you have to bring the mic closer to your mouth.
All right. Okay.
Sorry. Does anyone want to add or follow up on that, Nation?
Test. So I think that, so I'm going to be a little contrary, because I really think that if diversity means all the things that Sita has suggested it could mean or should mean, then we failed significantly when we continue to fail. Because there are significant pockets of our communities that don't feel like they belong to this city. They don't feel like they have an equal chance. And our newspapers, our statistics from the Toronto District School Board, employment statistics verify these things that to be fact. So what it does open up for me is this conversation of the idea that this word diversity, from a cultural heritage standpoint, I think serves a purpose to signal to community that we want to acknowledge the complexity of what our community looks like and perhaps what our community feels like, but it doesn't necessarily challenge power. It doesn't necessarily challenge barriers to those who may live within the community and add to the cultural flavor of the community, but may not necessarily have equitable access to power, right? So diversity doesn't mean that thing. Diversity is a way of saying you are welcomed in your place, right? You are welcomed here, and from a marketing and promotion standpoint, it absolutely works, because you don't have to get into the deeper narrative. Well, what does that diversity actually look like on the ground? Who has access to power? Who gets the job versus who doesn't? And I think that whether it's in our cultural institutions or our economic institutions, I think diversity is being embraced because there's a recognition that the demographic of Toronto is changing, and in some instances, it means a change of power. It means a change of voting power, and it means a change of spending power.
You just, Scott, went through seeing World Pride happen, and so it seems marketing within cultural diversity was slapping us in the face there. Do you want to talk a bit about that element, maybe with juxtaposed against what Nation's comments are around the reality of, are we failing or are we being successful in some elements and failing in others?
Sure. I actually agree with what Sita is saying, and also I see what Nation's points are as well. I think around World Pride, there's no doubt that from my perspective as executive director at the archives, that I saw the marketing power of the city, using that for World Pride, but I also was part of an experience that was really truly, in my opinion, it was very genuine, or there was a lot of really genuine excitement and acceptance around World Pride that we haven't seen at other Prides. So I think that when we're talking about embracing diversity, that World Pride, from my perspective, was a good example of a success. Saying that, within even the archives, which is what I can really speak more about, the lesbian and gay archives, there's so many communities within our community that have let us know at the archives that they feel like, and we acknowledge and accept that we lack diversity. We lack maybe, or the feeling is that we lack many of the records of underrepresented communities within our community as well. And so that's something that we've really are trying to acknowledge and work and change. And so I think that it's, speaking to what you're saying, Nation, I think it's an ongoing, process for us as an organization that, has had to fight, very hard for rights and for acceptance. And then within that, we have a lot of work still to do. So that's what I would speak to.
So you alluded to the diversity within diversity, which makes me think of you, Tanzina, because the Council of South Asians is regionally such a huge representation of cultures and communities. So how are you dealing with cultural diversity within those many layers?
Sure. I just wanted to start off by saying how complex it is for individuals when they migrate. They usually leave their identities behind. They come to a society where we do pride ourselves in terms of being multicultural, but once they do come here, they realize all the barriers that they're going to face in terms of leading a normal or an equitable life, really. So their needs are complex, and I think we as an entire community really need to, try harder to understand those needs, and also to tailor different strategies and come up with different approaches to actually address those needs. One thing that I personally feel is that when we're thinking about multiculturalism, and if we really do give so much importance to diversity, it should play out in different sectors. When you think of leadership in Toronto, especially in terms of governance, racialized populations hold a very low percentage of leadership positions all across Toronto. So I think leaders as well should be representative of the communities that they serve, so we do definitely need diverse leaders. That's one thing that I've seen. Another issue that we have, especially at a community level, is reaching out to communities. Oftentimes we have mainstream service providers coming out, and they do want to reach out and get to know more about communities, but it's come to the point where the communities themselves have lost trust in a lot of mainstream agencies, and I think we need to really focus on trust building as a whole. And another thing that I do want to point out is that in terms of diversity, it's sort of a definition that we've come up with, and the definition it's not rooted from the community itself, it's not rooted from diverse communities. So maybe to understand what diversity means from their perspective and make that our definition of what it really is.
So Tanzina's last comment around voice and whose voice controls the notion of how one understands diversity makes me come to you, Carolyn, because obviously as a representative of First Nations community, you can speak about a history that is this kind of mainstream notion that's white, might be understood as too many as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant understanding of what diversity is. And I know you, from a leadership standpoint, as a former chief, have to and still do deal with managing how leaders deal with things, as well as the grassroots community, as well as all of that history that can weigh one down as they walk in the room. Sorry, too heavy? Too much?
That's quite a bit. So I'm the delinquent one here. I got you late.
Far from it.
And I say that the same reason we had to leave this place is the same reason I have difficulty getting back. There's just too many people. And I think it's crazy out there tonight on the road. My goodness. But yeah, I was thinking about this and, reading your questions, and last night and thinking about what I would say, and that I think I have to start out by saying that the First Nations / Aboriginal community is a different community. It's different than everyone sitting here, in that because it comes from a, that Indigenous perspective, and that we could have Aboriginal youth, we could have Aboriginal gay, lesbian, so we could have people living beside in your community. So the fact that it, we're coming to terms, I think, as a city about recognizing the Aboriginal people. And so I'll say First Nations. You know that the term Aboriginal refers to the First Nations status Indians who have reserve lands and are members of a First Nation or band. The Inuit that are in the north, and there's people who live here, and the Métis who live all over this city, which are mixed blood people, and that who just are not Inuit and are not status Indians. So there's always a mix of even us. So one of the things I find is that, the other thing I got to tell you, of the 70,000 declared Aboriginal people in Toronto, almost all of them are from someplace else. I got the data from our band office today. There's 23 Mississaugas living in Toronto. So the others, the other 670,000, 69,700, say, whatever that number is from someplace else. So Toronto is made up of a whole diverse population, from around the continent, literally, of Indigenous people from, across the country and into South America, or into the United States, south of us. So we are coming with a change in the law, recognition, that we've been advocating for a long time to be recognized. That it is significant when the Premier of this province starts the address. I want to recognize that we're on the land of the Mississauga and Credit First Nation. In our book, it doesn't get any better. And when it gets recognized here, and people will say, who? What? But it's a start, and that the events and stuff, like different kind of promotional events, tourism related, or we're part of a group, that we show up and we're there and in our outfits. And I say, people say, what are you wearing that vest for? And I says, well, they got to know that there's an Indian in the room. And here I am advocating for us. And that, so, and even us, even our people, we're in, what do you call it? Getting proud to be recognized. There's a day when it was not that way at all. And that the city is, I think we're moving along in, recognition. And I got to tell you a story about, we went to Vaughan doing a archaeological work, and up there at Wilcox Lake up there. We had the opening, and we were invited to come in to the event launching the whole project, and they put Indigenous design on the trail and on symbolism on the wall. So it's like tourism, right? But are we there? And we were like an afterthought. We were brought in, and we were pushed from the start of the agenda to the end of the agenda. Everybody was leaving when we got up to drum and, dance. And then what happened is the drum called everybody back. All there was 200 people there in that little area, and there was more people in the free hot dog line than our line. But it changed when the drum sounded and they started to sing. And so afterwards, and when the politicians saw the impact of us being there, the counselors come up to me and said, I can't believe what happened. They really liked you. Well, good, I said. We should have been at the start of the agenda. And he just looks over at his communication person. He goes, what happened? So see, we were like an afterthought. Oh yeah, we got to accommodate them. And so we changed, and he said, I'm sorry about that. You know, that we should have recognized that. But with all that diverse community that was there, he didn't think that they would like us or know about us. And I'm like, So we're still coming from almost a negative background. And that everyone else, you know, and we always come off sounding negative and mad and, you know, claiming the land and all that kind of stuff. And so I always say that we have to change our story a little bit, you know, and be out there, be proud and active and start doing. So that's what I like to do.
So
Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn. I think your story just told us that sometimes the marketing element is used to take bad moments and make them good, because you just talked about what was almost a showy kind of piece that became more impactful and was used as an educational tool. So I think, to Steve's point, the marketing piece may be useful to empower communities and to allow some points of access. I mean, when you live in a city this diverse, where economic power is a major part, sometimes the marketing allows you to access that economic power. I'm wondering now if we can talk a little bit about the work you do in your different sectors of the community and how important it is for your various constituents to feel recognized within the power structure in the mainstream. Our organization has seen that this type of conversation is a responsibility to make sure that diverse cultural community organizations, a lot of whom are really the keepers of their heritage narrative, so you may not have a association such as yours with a heritage tag in its name, but essentially because of the work you're doing, you have a sense of the heritage of those different communities. So maybe you want to talk a bit about that from your various constituency angles, and then we'll see if we've got any questions from the audience.
Karen, Testing. Okay, it's working. I just wanted to touch on your point. When we do have migrants coming to the country, they do engage in a lot of dialogue and, of course, shared stories, and oftentimes it ends up being what we call the immigrant story. But these narratives stay inside those communities, and it doesn't become heard at a wider mainstream level. So there's a huge disconnect. But I think it's not the issue isn't that they don't want to share their stories, because they're looking for a way to share them, but it's just that we haven't created a platform for them to be able to do that. So maybe we need to think about opportunities that we provide to learn about their stories a bit more better.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just want to give you some examples of some things that I've done as a resident in a neighborhood, at a neighborhood level. I live in the Grange neighborhood, which is near Spadina College. So many years ago, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years ago, when we recognized what the neighborhood was like, we became very involved in getting all of the street signs renamed so that they had Chinese, the names of the streets were in Chinese, because it's a very large Chinese population. But it wasn't a marketing activity saying this is Chinatown. It was actually the names of the streets. So of course, the transportation department comes along, decides that they're going to redesign all of the street signs, and they started removing the signs, putting in the new design. So we became very involved in actually getting resolutions passed at City Council. And throughout the city, there are, of course, all sorts of other street signs. That's just a very small example, but it's about making people feel that their identity matters. Similarly, as a staff person, the various funding programs that we had, a lot of it was allocated towards making sure that, they've since changed the criteria. I'm no longer there in that particular role. And part of it was actually to fund advocacy activities so that organizations could actually advocate at City Hall, advocate at the province, advocate federally about the issues that were important to them, not service provision, but actually advocacy. And I think that that's a really important thing to do. When you talked about, for example, the World Pride event, a significant part of that conference, of that celebration, was actually the Human Rights Conference. And the Human Rights Conference provided a mechanism for all sorts of people from all over the world to come and talk about the full array of human rights issues related to the LGBT community. And part of that activity involved several large public forums, which were free to the public. So you had the former president of Iceland talking about her issues, the journalist from Russia, a lot of people from the African communities, and of course we had to go to bat for getting people to get visas to come to Canada. Plus also extensive work with the media so that those stories were front and center in the newspaper. So it wasn't just, it's very easy to have dismissed World Pride as just a dancing, costume, parade activity, but there were significant discussions that were also taking place which advanced human rights issues. And I think that is the importance of diversity, is being able to move the discussion to a human rights agenda, to talk about sharing power, to talk about civic engagement. So while it's true we haven't reached where we need to be, it provides, as my colleague here says, it does provide a platform for the discussion and a platform for advocacy and a platform it's an opening for the discussion.
Want to weigh in? Nation?
Absolutely. So I agree wholeheartedly. I think that the fact that this panel is sitting on this stage having this conversation in the 21st century should not be dismissed as trivial. That we have made significant headways as a city, as a community. I think while saying that, I think it's also equally important to keep the uncomfortable part of that conversation alive, because it's easy to slip into a place of comfort and thinking that yes, we are diverse, yes, we are inclusive, but not necessarily get to what that actually means in terms of creating trust, building bridges, of not taking Aboriginal people in an event and feeling like opening a speech and acknowledging that you're on people's lands, but then pushing them back to the end of the agenda. Like, if that's what diversity allows us to feel and feel comfortable that yes, we're evolved as a society, then I think it's our responsibility to keep pushing and saying that's not good enough. We have made some headway, and kudos, and let's celebrate the people that continue to fight legislatively, continue to advocate, continue to be out there in community and support. But let's make sure that the word diversity, much like multiculturalism and whatever other buzzword comes up 10 years from now, doesn't act as a safety blanket and a comfort blanket to say, oh yes, we've made it, because we have not. It's important to celebrate what we have accomplished. There's no doubt about that, because if we're always in the negative, then it feels like we're never going to get over that mountain. But I'd like to be part of a conversation that simultaneously celebrates significant changes, acknowledges that there is no monoculture, even within South Asian, even Caribbean culture, Aboriginal culture, LGBTQ. There is no monoculture. These intersections of identity challenge us to go beyond the simplification of diversity. It is an entry point, as long as we stay committed to the complexity of that conversation and not feel wrapped in our comfort blanket that has the big D on the back.
Do you want to jump in, Scott, or should we put it to the audience? Yeah? Is anyone?
I want to know from Carolyn whether she knows all the 23 people who are Mississaugas in
I live in
Toronto.
Toronto. Do you know them all?
Only a couple of them. I asked just for the number because I'm not privy to a band member's information type thing. So I just told her, just give me the numbers. Who's got a Toronto listing? So I know a couple of them, but not all of them. Yeah, I'll figure that out later.
Do we have anything from the audience, Gary or Nancy? If you have a question, you can just wave it and we'll...
While we're waiting for that, I had a very interesting experience in August on City Council when we begin actually every single City Council meeting singing with a performance of O Canada. And there are 3 or 4 lines in there which probably need to be changed. Where it says our home and native land. There are some people who said it should be changed to our home on native land. And where it says, God keep us, people have said it should be changed to we keep us, so that we have some responsibility for this and for keeping our land free. And then, of course, the motion that I moved was with Councillor McConnell, because I never sing the actual words that's in the legislation because they're pretty objectionable, several of them. So Councillor McConnell, since I was there, I thought I would move a motion that we would try to make it gender neutral. And the only reason for raising this story is that the backlash that I got hundreds of emails saying the most incredible things to me, like, we should never change anything, that this is, tradition. We have to keep our tradition. Why don't you go back to Sikh land? I have no idea what Sikh land is. And it was very interesting that this last week, a white male proposed the same change in the House of Commons. It made its way through second reading in the House of Commons, and I was listening to a radio broadcast where people were interviewing him, and he wasn't getting the same kind of anti-immigrant, racist, sexist, horrible comments. Anyway, I've printed all of the emails because I figure one day I'll write a story about it. Anyway, all of this is by way of saying that many of the people who objected to the name change did not realize that the very first version of the national anthem was gender neutral, didn't have God in it, didn't have native land in it. And it's been changed 5 times, and the current French version is certainly gender neutral. So there's a lot of stuff that we actually don't know about the history of our country. So I took all of those as learning opportunities. So I would diligently respond to every single email saying, did you know? Did you know? And use them as teaching opportunities. It was quite the ride there for a couple of weeks. And because I started getting backlash, many of my colleagues on City Council who said they would support it didn't at the end of the day. And all it was a motion to introduce. So it's going to be back on the agenda in January with a new City Council, and I've encouraged people to come and make deputations and to just sing as part of their deputation. Activism.
We love you for your activism. I've got a question that is asking about the Francophone community, their presence in Toronto, and the need for us to include the Francophone layer within this conversation around cultural diversity. So I know if people do you want to say anything about the French element? And for me, the French component is a window to, as you know, Sita, the city has a list of the 20 largest language groups in the city of Toronto, and they print so that there is access for communication purposes in those language groups.
Actually, the city policy requires that you have to do it in French if you're doing it in any other language. I don't know if people are following it. I don't even know who's monitoring that policy. But the French community is actually like all of the other communities, because we have French communities from all of Africa, from several Caribbean countries. You've got Quebec, you've got France, so it's as complicated and as diverse as every other community, even though it's less than, 1% of the population of the city.
So the question also went to the need for a French-speaking or a French person to be on the panel to speak about the issues around language. So I think your comment, Sita, about the complexity and the diversity of the French community kind of alludes to that. I must say this panel could have been triple this size for us to hit the range of cultural diverse communities that are out there, and within each segment of this, I mean, I was challenged in nations presence because a part of us thought we should have a youth member from the community talking about matters around youth, but I knew he was young at heart, so that's how he made it on the panel.
Not the only one who's young at heart.
He's not young at heart. There was also a question about caravan. So I wanted to see whether or not people wanted to say anything about caravan. One, if anyone remembers caravan, there was lots of activity and happiness around caravan. We had the discussion around caravan in the office, and it's been in a couple of different forms where we were saying that we've moved past caravan. It used to be that multiculturalism in Toronto was that you could check out someone's food and their music. And we believe that the city has gone beyond that. And some may argue not so much, that it still plays very surface. Scott, do you want to talk about caravan? No?
I was part of caravan.
Really?
Yeah. I was part of caravan, and
you remember it?
Oh, absolutely. I think it was you grabbed your passport and you could experience a culture. You have a cultural experience traveling, I guess, various communities all in one night, right? So I think whether it's caravan or caravana or Scotiabank Carnival, whatever it's called at this point in time, it would always be caravana to me. Pride or any other cultural event. I think that these efforts to begin to bridge communities are significant. I think that resources going into these types of events that continue to celebrate who we have amongst us as family are incredibly important events. Those events should be seen as not only celebrations but entry points, relationship building, community building, and they should be, from my experience and appreciation of going through those events, they should be symbolic of, in my mind, a deeper commitment to to fostering community building. Right? That. Carnival isn't just the Caribbean community's thing, right? It's a Toronto thing. That Pride isn't just the LGBTQ community thing. It is a Toronto thing. This is us. This is what we do. This is what we celebrate. The powwows, if they still happen in November, one of my favorite things. It's around my birthday, so it's one of my favorite things to do. that these things are they're a way of refreshing our relationship with the other, right? And reminding ourselves that this is part of our municipal identity. It's part of our social identity, and to have that celebrated constantly, I think is the significance and power of things like Caravan and Carnival, so on and so forth.
Well, the thing about events like the Caribbean Carnival is that most people don't actually realize that it is the single largest economic activity festival in Toronto. Brings in close to $500 million a year into the local economy. You contrast that with the activities like TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, which brings in a fraction of it, doesn't have the same numbers of people, yet it is an activity which seems to have higher status in civic life because of the US and the Hollywood glam. And the same is true. The Molson India, whatever that car thing is, brings in what, maybe $10, $20 million, if that, 20,000 people. Not a whole lot of people, but it is. But it doesn't have the same kind of sort of credibility, it seems, by some people.
I think
it's because it's from minority communities, even though everybody wants it to have.
I think I agree with you, and I agree that it's based in quote unquote, I would suggest world majority community, but folks refer to folks as minority communities. And I'd say that the difference between a TIFF and a carnival is TIFF has a significant Hollywood machine behind it, right? There's tons and tons of dollars that goes into why TIFF holds that kind of place in our cultural pantheon as the thing to go out to. It has words like gala attached to it, right? And you can show up and hang out with Johnny and Jean or whoever else is there, right? So there's a larger narrative around Hollywood and movies that gives TIFF that the sheen that it has to offer.
I'm wondering whether or not we will jump to other audience questions, but at this time, because my plan wasn't to read your questions, was actually to just get it and then actually have you say it. So Gary has a mic. My apologies, because I don't want to take anybody's voice. And we have a question regarding preservation services, and this somewhat speaks to our the reason for doing this symposium, and it isn't. We're not missing the point that this grouping is not as large. When we have built heritage symposiums, the rooms spilling over, it's a smaller group. So to Nation's point, there's work that needs to be done. And around having people see Heritage Toronto present a symposium on cultural diversity that everyone comes to, it almost seemed like this was the one people thought that the diverse people would come to, and it wasn't for the rest of the heritage community. So I think that isn't lost on us. But that said, the built heritage question, who was that? You're up.
Hi, I'm Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Paul Farrelly, Church Wellesley Neighborhood Association. And every 5 years at this time, we talk about the state of heritage, and it's still not very good. And here's the problem. This is the best panel, though, in a long time, because it's about the heritage that is here. It's diversity, not a slogan, but diversity as a river. And we are connecting with each other here. But we have such few ways generally in the city to fully embrace diversity other than a slogan. And the problem is that heritage is seemingly in the past tense when you talk about Heritage Toronto. Heritage is not past tense, it's present tense. Yeah. My heritage is Irish. I have the same challenge as walking in the St. Patrick's Day Parade or as arriving in this place 40 years ago, as trying to connect a place's arrival, trying to understand the place here, the place I've left, the condition of exile, the connection. Here, Heritage Toronto, our WASP-established formalization of heritage, the monument, is basically a preservation body on the one side, a charitable organization that does walking tours, and there is no real diversity stream working its way through City Hall. But there's no department, there's no committee that you can go on front of and talk to. Economic development was raised about the Carnival. Yes, because they glom onto it because, hey, you can get the readout of how many people spent their cash money card, and they can say, oh, that's the economic impact of this or that or the other. But this is all so abstract and nothing about our engagement with each other. And we never get to engage with each other because we are partitioned away in these empty vessels that are not relevant. And in the title, Our Shared Past, it's our shared present. It's our presences. It's our being that is our heritage. And it's our working out of that in Toronto in this place that is what will make Toronto good. So my question is, what body, what committee, how can we get this stream going at City Hall and so we can get and listen to each other continually and not just be rolled out for, as Karen says, the sort of building dimension of the thing.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Paul. I even heard the Irish coming at you, Paul.
The fire. Now, does someone want to tackle? I don't know that Paul. I want to mess with your question and say, does it have to be City Hall? Does it? Okay. Does someone want to talk about how we continue these conversations through formal city process?
I think Paul is very frustrated by the fact, as I am, by the fact that the legislative framework within which Heritage Preservation Services works seems to make staff focus more on built form, on buildings, on architecture, and not on the social history that comes along with these various projects that are looked at. I've had my own tangles with Heritage Preservation Services, and recently, certainly at the last Community Council meeting, every time a study report came forward, I amended it so that the study was not just about the bill form, but I added in social value of those streets. What went on Spadina Avenue? You have, the buildings, the marketing, the music industries, and so on and so forth. So it does take a shift in mindset, and you have to ask those questions. So I do agree with you. There is a gap there, and not attention is being paid to social history.
I think that announcement is speaking to our late start because of the crazy traffic that held our friend back here. So I just wanted to let you know, as the announcement comes, they officially won't kick us out till 8:30. So if you are okay, we'll continue on for another couple of minutes and then wrap up. I think we've got probably 5 minutes more of discussion, and then we'll put another question to the floor. I have a couple of questions here about the LGBTQ community, as well as about the city becoming more accepting of diversity as generations go by. Because as you probably notice, I notice all the time when I walk through the city, couples, the people who are holding hands, seldom do they look like each other. There's all this diversity of the way people not only play or work, but engage personally with each other. So some like to think that if we just leave it alone, we'll all intermarry and intermingle, and then we won't be able to speak about the other because you'll be carrying a piece of the other around inside you. So do we want to talk a little more about Paul's question or put it to the audience?
Just one final comment. I think the part of our
We'll do one last round.
community activity that has been very successful in terms of social history has been in our literary traditions. I think the books, the novels, the creative part of our culture has actually been quite successful.
So maybe let's do that. Let's have last comments from the panel. We'll take our 5 minutes to see if people want to comment, say something they haven't said, or comment on anything that's been stated. Tanzina?
I just wanted to thank you for what you said. It calls out to everybody. My history, who I am, who my parents are, it is me today. It is not what I was yesterday. It's inclusive of everything, and it will also lay out my future and my experiences in the future. So you're right. Heritage shouldn't be in the past. It is the present. It's also our future. And in terms of actually having a strong committee, I think we really need to grasp and promote these leaders who really have a focus on equity and promoting diversity as well as inclusion. Not just to have a conversation, but have it played out in policies. And not just in policies, but implement those policies on the ground. And talking about diversity or heritage or people being able to share their stories, I find it so alarming that we need to create platforms to have these conversations. It's a human right. It really is. That's what we're talking about. And we really need to just strive harder and to find out and secure a community as well as promote. I guess what I'm talking about is a strong committee that can really promote this and champion this. I feel like everybody's just tired of talking about it over and over again, and we really need to come up with a solid strategy. But thank you, Paul, for sharing what you did.
Steve?
Scott. That's okay.
I call you a different name every time I open my mouth, don't I?
I think I agree. I think that was. I appreciate your comments, Paul. From what I would like to have as my closing thought is, I moved to the city of Toronto 7 years ago from Ottawa, and in the area that I'm working in now, so I can speak to the LGBT community anyway. I do think that the city of Toronto is doing a lot more than other cities in Canada. I'm not saying that it's the end of the conversation, but I just wanted to just say that at the Canadian Lesbian and Gay Archives especially, we've seen real growth over the last few years, and we've been involved in some really interesting projects around diversity. We just signed a memorandum of understanding with the Canadian Museum of History to work with them on the LGBTQ community being represented in their Great Hall that's going to be launched in 2017. So those are that's an example of where I think that there's more recognition anyway and willingness to work with the community that I'm working in. And I also, just speaking a little bit to Paul's point, I do agree that it's our history is also living out right now. And I think that from my organization's perspective, what we've had to do is we have to make it a priority, which we've done. And it's not only in strategic plans, but it's in everything that we do, that we're trying to relate that back to what the priority is for an organization. And that's something that we're attempting to do. And we're also utilizing technology to accomplish this as well. So it's just some different ways of looking at how we can engage the communities.
Just before you move from that point, I noted in Pride the human rights element because I thought about Caribbean Carnival, Caravana, and how you could have that type of a political element added to a festival, because there are layers that I think that was a good example for others who produce festivals to learn from.
Well, if I could just jump in quickly too with World Pride, I know we don't have much time, but it was the Human Rights Conference, definitely. But what Nation was speaking to about it being something that the city celebrates, World Pride really was celebrated, I think, by the entire city of Toronto, and it was shown in art, especially with Ryerson and the AGO and those types of organizations that were also putting on art exhibits and shows and having conversations that way. And I think that, as far as World Pride's concerned, if we could have that kind of city participation in every year for Pride, but also other festivals and other organizations, I think that would be wonderful.
And there you hit the nail on the head. Carolyn.
Okay, try to do this quickly. First of all, if you didn't know, the Mississaugas are the host First Nation for the Pan Am Games coming up next year. So there's going to be a lot of activity with us. But I'll tell you, it didn't come easy. We had to lawyer up, and we had to lobby up to get it. So what is that? But we are. So we'll forget all of that other stuff, and we'll start to take the lead on who we are and what we can do. So to the city, I think I participated in the planning process, with on the archaeology management, and then was asked to sit on the higher level heritage stuff. And so I made comments that it takes a lot of my time to get here and be present and say something. But I think that's important to be there, because we've been insignificant in the presence here. And what many people see is not a good thing of our people. So trying to be here, advocate for us, and I ask for the laws to be changed, the rules of the city be changed, include these kinds of words. And the city is looking to, naming a street. We're asking to name a street after us. Never mind everybody else who come here. And it happened. September 5th, we unveiled 2 streets that had our name on it, Chichuk and Wabanuse. How good does that get? I mean, everybody put their name on over top of our land, and we're coming back and we're naming the street. And we want more. So you would tell everybody in your district to name it after our people, because we're the original people. And as I say, we can get my moccasin identifier down in this whole province, and everyone will know who's the original people of this land. So let's go for it.
I feel like you should have been the last word now, Nation. How do you top that?
Probably she should have been the last word. You don't want to... So I constantly struggle with my idealism and my belief or need to believe that we can get to a place where diversity is not even a conversation. There's no need to have a forum on diversity. It's a part of who we are. It's not a focal point. It's not something that needs to change. That's my idealism. My understanding of human nature is that power is what influences change. Whether that's money or vote or whatever the cases may be, that is what forces change. It's those who get out to vote. It's those who have buying power. It's those who keep the economy going. That's where change happens. And so to Paul's point, Paul, I celebrate, I love everything that you said. That we need to be very careful about being trapped within the paradigm of what heritage connotates. And I think you crystallized it absolutely perfectly, that this institution called Heritage Toronto now embodies this thing that puts boundaries about how we define heritage. And I think that heritage, on one hand, gives us continuity. It allows us to preserve the things that bring out the best in us. And I think from a multicultural, diverse standpoint, we sometimes cling to heritage because it gives us safety. It gives us a sense of belonging, a sense of sturdiness. How do we keep this? How do we keep the narrative alive so that Pride, Caravan, or Carnival are not just very convenient, safe entertainment experiences, but genuine experiences for community building, I think, is when we get out and we vote, and when we speak with our money, and when we influence decision makers to say, yes, we need to invest in arts, we need to invest in culture, we need to invest in events. And these events should not just be a convenient night out. All of that is wonderful, but let's keep the conversation alive about where we are today. Let's keep the conversation alive about what is the heritage we're forming now.
And on that note, thank you all very much. I'm going to ask Kate Marshall,
Yes.
board member, to say goodnight.
Yes, I wanted to thank all of you for staying. I'm sorry that we didn't have more time. This is a great discussion, and I hope we can continue it. And thank you to Nation, Carolyn, oh my goodness, now I'm Zina, sorry, Scott and Sita for participating. We really appreciate you coming out, and I'm very happy to hear that, you know, Heritage Toronto is working hard to talk about the present. And in fact, we've been doing a lot of work to remind people that heritage is about the personal and about the present, not just about the past. And I think we've got lots of great discussions, more discussions to have. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks all to you.
Thank you.